So it's day 260, and the big story, or actually the only really big story today, is the Russian withdrawal from Kherson. And I talked about this yesterday some. I talked about this in another video where I talked about the Russian reaction to it, which was really palpable. And you can see that. You can go back one video if you haven't seen that. So let's talk about what's actually going on. Here's the British intelligence update. So the Brits said this on November 9th. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu ordered the withdrawal of Russian forces from the west bank of the Dnipro River. Okay, now let me also clarify something about the banks, how that works, because I got this wrong and somebody corrected me. And I'm always happy to have somebody correct me. This was David Allen, who said the bank of the river is determined by the flow, not how it looks when you look at the map. I said it wrong and he corrected me. Looking downstream, the southeast side is the left side. And so that's how you go with the downstream of it. My reply was, that's interesting. I learned all sorts of interesting things from viewers. Thanks for teaching me. So David, you get the trophy for being awesome. Thank you for your help and your insight. Okay, let's get back to this. So now we understand which is left and right of the Dnipro River. Now, they said something really interesting here. In retreating, Russian forces have destroyed multiple bridges and likely laid mines, and we knew that. We know that they're trying to slow down the Ukrainian advance and putting booby traps and things along those lines. But this was really key. The loss of the Kherson's west bank will likely prevent Russia from achieving its strategic aspiration of a land bridge reaching Odessa to permanently cut off all of Ukraine, to capture all of the Black Sea. And that is really powerful. And I hadn't even considered that before, of what this meant strategically. Strategically, they have to do it. They just have to. They can't sustain there because of HIMARS coming into play. But yeah, they lost something big there. Okay, this is the ISW yesterday. Today's is not out yet. The Russian Ministry of Defense ordered Russian forces on the west bank of the Dnipro to begin withdrawing to the east bank. They said Russian withdrawal from the west bank of the Dnipro is unlikely to be a trap meant to lure Russian troops into costly combat near Kherson. And that's what the Ukrainians were worried about for a little while. The Russian information space predictably reacted to the announcement of the withdrawal with varying degrees of ire and concern. And this is what my last video was about. So I looked at this, Russian to pull out of a frontline city of Kherson, says the Ministry of Defense. And then we went through the articles or not the articles, the discussions at the bottom, like what people were saying, and it was amazing how how virulent people were anti-Russian military or anti-Russian administration, where you didn't see that kind of thing just a few months earlier. Now, along the way, the Guardian's talking about how Russia is setting booby traps in Kherson city, so they're trying to lay mines and other things that will cause lots of mayhem and death and that kind of thing. And that's a smart military move for the Russians to be doing that as they withdraw. Next, settlements liberated in southern Ukraine. Zelensky says Russia begins a retreat from Kherson and that 41 settlements have been recaptured already. Zelensky said that the number of Ukrainian flags returning to their rightful place within the framework of the ongoing defense operation is already in the dozens. So that's good news. They're gaining this ground. They're going to gain all this ground. And you know, I said this already and I'm predicting it. And I said blue by Christmas. Like, they're going to have this, and it may very well be sooner than that, but they're going to take the upper side of Kherson. And I have no doubt about it at this point. Okay, so now this article, I think, captured the spirit of it perfectly. Bad news politically, shrewd move militarily, what Russia's Kherson retreat means and what it doesn't. So on November 9th, again, the commander said enough, and they're moving up to 30,000 troops, according to a top U.S. general, out of that northwestern side of Kherson. And it's, as they say here, it's a huge political setback for Russia. Remember, Russia said it's Russian soil forever. They said we're going to defend every inch of it, and then they have to move out. Militarily, this article says it's been a militarily wise for a long time, but there has been a political reluctance in Russia to actually do this because it's a setback. And that's right, it is a setback, but this whole area above the Dnieper will be Ukrainian in very short order. Now, other articles talk about how Putin's really not taking the blame for any of this. Russian leader has distanced himself from withdrawal decision, but the Kremlin appears to be keen to learn from mistakes. I think there's something really interesting about the way that Putin has led during this. Uh, the generals are making the decisions. The generals are the ones doing this. Like he's not getting his hands dirty with the nastiness of having to withdraw forces. Okay, Putin was not present to deliver the bad news. The article goes on, Putin doesn't want to deliver the bad news and take responsibility for this retreat, said a former senior defense official speaking on condition of anonymity to avoid reprisal. He does not want to be associated with failure, right? Again, for Putin, a lot of this is not about character, it's about smoke and mirrors or image, creating an image of, see how strong and powerful I am. Now, as for taking more time, Putin is in no rush. He sees this as a longer, large-scale conflict with the West, the official said. He's an opportunist by nature. His strategy now is to see how things stand by the end of winter and then reassess his strategy. So he thinks that the longer things go on, the better his odds are. And that's true in one regard. If it's over now, he's in a bad shape. But the longer he can draw this out, the better it is for him in the sense of something might go wrong for Ukraine. But I think Ukraine just gets stronger as time goes on. Serkovin is the perfect figure to announce the retreat. Why, might you ask? Well, he has no enemies within the system, and he can't be blamed for not understanding the military situation. That's right. He was just brought in. It's not like this was his debacle. So he's actually a good person to be the bearer of bad news. But again, Russians, there's a recent poll that showed by 44% of Russians still definitely supported the actions of their army. Only 22% were definitely in favor of continuing military action. That is huge. I can't even explain just how huge that change is. Okay, situation in Donetsk. Let's turn our attention from Kherson to Donetsk for a little bit, and then we'll talk about a couple other things, and we'll be done. Situation in Donetsk remains the most difficult operationally. There's recent movement in Lyman. The Russians keep throwing their new recruits at them. No success. In Bakhmut, he's had the same kind of thing. 138 casualties. About 40 of those were killed and the rest wounded. So there's still a hot war up in the northeast, just like there is in Kherson, and that's what's going on militarily on the ground. At the same time, they're trying to work on the Kerch Bridge. Yesterday, the British Ministry of Defense said that it's going to be, they can get across the Kerch, that's not the issue, but to get it fully operational again won't be until September of 2023. That's the British assessment. And so that was quite a blow. Germany is delivering more Irish-T missiles, and what we've learned is that the Irish-T has made a name for itself, just like HIMARS. As far as air defense, Irish-T has quickly become beloved. The U.S. estimates 200,000 military casualties on all sides, about 100,000 Russians, but General Mark Miley also said it's probably about equivalent for Ukraine. Now, that's interesting because we really don't have any real facts from either the Ukrainian or Russian government about their own military estimates. We have some, but not like definitive, hardcore kind of like something you can hang your hat on. And I'll talk about this a little bit later about like what the actual. I'll talk about Russian math about casualties in a forthcoming video. Let me just say that. Now, let's talk some fun with Russian state media. Putin won't attend the G20, says the Kremlin. Instead, they're going to send Sergei Lavrov, but Putin is not going to go. And I think that that's really interesting. Putin does not want to put himself in a place where he's going to be castigated by the rest of the members of the G20. Probably 16 of the 20 would really have some significant issues with him, and China wouldn't say anything. They would remain tight-lipped. And there's a couple that might even be somewhat more sympathetic, but there's not, I mean, he's really not going to be the fair-haired boy when he would, if he did attend. So Lavrov will go and he will probably castigate his colleagues for having such terrible attitudes, Russophobic attitudes toward Russia, but that's probably all that'll come of it. House of Representatives in the United States is still, they still haven't figured out the final numbers. So yes, the Republicans certainly will take the House. There's about 40 seats that have not been counted yet. Now, that means that you need 218 for a majority. The Republicans have 209. They have gained 6. The Democrats have lost 7. They have 189. 40 remaining if they had an even split. Even if they didn't have an even split, if the Democrats got 75% of what's left, the Republicans would still have the House. So the House is there. Now the Senate's a whole different story. The Senate is 48 to 46. But it really, I think, is going to come down, and I could be wrong, but I think it's going to come down to what happens in Georgia. Now, here in Georgia, this is Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, and that's too close to call. It's going to go to a runoff election, and I think that's going to be the difference maker. So it was tighter, but you're still going to see, I think, in the House, you'll see a pretty decent, healthy margin. It's not going to be like one over the line, but it's not going to be as big as some had predicted. Okay, so that's all. Thank you for your time. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.